Okay. Video game cities are weird from Rasputin.
When I first played The Witcher 3, I thought I had the full measure of what it was capable of after a dozen or so hours of playtime, but then I reached Novigrad and it kind of blew my mind. I
Hmm.
had played plenty of massive open world games by that point in my life, but while some had incredible and expansive wilds to journey across and others had dense and detailed cities to explore, I had never played one that did both convincingly. In the ones that tried to, the cities never felt realistic. For instance, take Skyrim. While each of the cities are intriguing and impressive in terms
Mm-hmm.
of theming and visual design, they don't really feel like proper cities. They are far too small and singular in focus, and their
Yeah.
populations are minuscule.
I mean, if you want to have like a realistic city, I mean, I think they'd be like, I mean, you could make a game around a realistic city. I mean, just look at any like GTA series where the majority of the map of any GTA is a city. And even then, the cities could still be like understandably kind of small.
With each city having the amount of people you'd historically expect to find in a small village and not a place with a fortified keep. I don't know, like when Nazim asks if you've been to the Cloud District lately, it's a bit baffling because how could you not, as there is barely any separation between it and the rest of Whiterun. Now the choice to have smaller cities makes sense given the general design goals of Skyrim. They want you to feel like you can interact with anyone and anything, and creating
Hmm.
bigger cities where most of the inhabitants and buildings largely act as set dressing would take away that aspect of the game.
I mean, and also, like, if you actually made like a realistic city, like, what kind of city would you consider realistic? Like, is it just merely for the fact that it's the size that counts? I mean, and what are you gonna like? A bigger city equal better city? Is that the case? I mean, like, are we just gonna base all of this off of like United States cities that are just like the biggest and whatnot? If you were to like make a game with the biggest city possible, it would take forever to walk, to walk from one side to the other, just to walk, regardless of if you have any, like, sort of like transportation or anything like that available.
Also, trying to scale the cities to something that more closely resembled reality probably would have broken Skyrim's engine irrevocably. Regardless of it being the right choice for the game, it does still have the effect of making the world feel smaller in a way. It makes it all the more obvious that it is just a representation of a city and not an actual one. Novigrad, however, really feels like a city. There are people everywhere you look, all going
Hmm.
about their business, and more often than not, it isn't them just doing one task in one place for all time. They move around, they seemingly have schedules and jobs and important places to be. Along with that, there are more buildings than you can
Damn, this is like another time someone's talking nothing but good things about Witcher 3. I gotta play this shit, dude.
reasonably keep track of, the majority of which tower over you, making it feel like the city is a world of its own. It can't be understood in just one glance and is as easy to get lost within as the vast marshes and mountains of the world outside of the walls. Novigrad feels alive. There is an energy to it that's undeniable and makes the game far richer because of it. The city matches the scale of the rest of the world, and the way it operates, as well as the fact that it exists within a larger context, provides a sort of realism to it. There's a sense that it could be a real city in a real world. Now, of course, in reality, it couldn't and it isn't meant to be. Major
Hmm.
cities are made to accommodate hundreds of thousands of people, and
Yeah.
they require countless considerations in order to build something that supports those who reside within it simultaneously. In games, however, the design goal generally is to support just one person, the player. The infrastructure of a video game city doesn't need to
Bro, what is this character? This looks like a baby, but is jacked. Like, what?
provide anything for anyone living in it because their needs don't exist. It doesn't matter that new ships will never come into Novigrad's harbor, or that these carts in Assassin's Creed 2 are always stationary, or that the
Yeah.
power lines in Liberty City don't really make any sense. Although it does make for a fire Any Austin video. Actually, in that video, he makes a point about how video games are top-down representations of real spaces. The aim of developers is to capture a vibe, not create a functional space, so they aren't focused on creating making practical cities. They're
Mm-hmm.
focused on creating something that feels close enough. We use the word simulation a lot when talking about video games, but with the exception of stuff like City Skylines, the vast majority of video game cities aren't truly simulations. They're simulacrums. A word I only know from Dungeons & Dragons and therefore am almost certainly missing its full
Simulacrum components, verbal somatic material, snow or ice in quantities sufficient to make made a life-size copy of duplicated creature or some hair. Oh wait. You shape an illusory duplicate for one duplicate of one beast or humanoid that is within range of the entire casting time of the spell. The duplicate creature, partially real. The duplicate is a creature partially real and formed from ice or snow, and it can take actions and otherwise be affected by a normal creature. It appears to be the same as the original, but it has half of the creature's hit point max and is formed without any equipment. Otherwise, the illusion uses all the statistics of the creature it duplicates. So it's similar, but not entirely.
philosophical context. They're imitations that don't have the components to truly operate, but when viewed from a certain perspective, they are able to convincingly fake it. Novigrad is not a functioning city. However, it has all the trappings of one that is, making it extremely easy to suspend disbelief and feel that sense of immersion we so often hope to find in games. This illusion only takes a tiny amount of investigation to shatter, though. If you spend time following different people in the city, you'll find that each is not an individual. They are an archetype, one who is assigned a zone to operate within and then move around interacting with environmental prompts that align with whatever their assigned tasks are. She'll clean clothes in any wash tub she comes across, he'll pick up boxes to take from one spot to another, he'll count the inventory of every pile of stuff he sees, but there is no rhyme or reason for any of it. Doing these things doesn't give them new clothes to wear or earn them money to help support their lifestyle or change the resources the city has, because why would it? Who cares about a nameless NPC's ability to meaningfully change their life? What does matter is that at a glance, it seems as if whatever they're doing could. And in all likelihood, you'll only ever give them a glance. In the game, you're a witcher and
I mean, yeah, like anytime I'm going through a city, my only concern is that it just looks like a city and is doing city-like things. Like, I mean, maybe there are some people that go up to every NPC to like talk to them, and maybe it's like, ooh, maybe this NPC will give me a quest for like the one item that I need, and it's like, no, dude, it's not. And I'm trying to think, did I used to play games like that back in the day? Like, did I used to go up to every NPC and talk to them to see if they were like a unique NPC? I mean, I don't think so.
have better things to do than watch this guy saw this piece of wood without ever making progress. You've got a daughter to find and monsters to slay, so while you may take a moment to appreciate the moving pieces of the city, the game is designed in a way where you're most likely just going to run by these people, because what you have going on is more important and interesting than any single person's mundane life here. The game doesn't need to do anything more, because all that matters is that it adds to the player's sense that this could be a real place, giving more weight to the aspects of the gameplay and story that actually do matter to them. When Ciri feels like a missing part of a place with a sense of life to it, it makes finding her feel even more important. Designing a city in a way that enhances the player's experience obviously goes beyond how it operates or seems to operate. It also can be seen in its layout. Historically, major cities in the real world sprung up near various water sources that best allowed for agriculture and trade, and then had to take the natural environment into account when developing their infrastructure. In games, though, devs aren't having to figure out how to build around the natural landscape. They're making the landscape.
Yeah. I mean, shit, though. If you want to have a good looking city, you just make it like good looking. These guys are building buildings on top of a bridge. Is there any example of this happening in like real life where there's like a bridge that is just so massive and stable across like, I don't know, like a river or something like that, where it's just so stable and massive enough that it can support like whole buildings on top of it? I don't think so. Anytime there's a bridge, it's always just so cars can get across. That's it. Now all of a sudden you want to stick a. I mean, granted, this looks cool, and I wouldn't bat an eye at this of whether or not this is like realistic. This is not a realistic depiction of a city. This wouldn't happen in real life. I'm not thinking about that. If I'm looking at this, I'm just going, oh wow, that looks cool.
Every aspect can be developed together to match the architect's vision and not have to compromise to account for reality. The existence of a river might be used in the lore to justify why a city is there, but the actual reason is to give the player something to interact with. So whether it be Novigrad's rivers,
or just look at and appreciate the artistic endeavor of trying to make like a cool looking city to look at.
terrain, or placement of buildings, they all exist for the player and have the dual purpose of seeming like a plausible feature while also being engaging to play around. Now this can all be a hard line to walk, especially when certain goals may be at odds with one another. For instance, it seems pretty clear that CD Projekt Red wanted Novigrad to feel like a maze of a city that anyone could get lost in, but at the same time, as the game puts a lot of emphasis on exploration, they almost certainly wanted it to feel navigable as to not create constant friction for players whenever they tried to go from one spot of the city to another. Depending on the quests the player pursues and choices they make, they can spend an inordinate amount of time in just the city alone. So making sure that moving through it didn't feel worse than moving through any other area of the game mattered a fair bit. To their credit, as confusing as Novigrad may seem at first, it is one of the few areas in The Witcher 3 where I feel like not using a minimap is extremely viable, and this is done through the inclusion of clever landmarks and terrain that help guide players. For instance, a few branches of the Pontar River cut through Novigrad in different ways, creating distinct sections of the city. To the south are the docks and various gang-controlled neighborhoods. In the center is the Market District, which is also alongside some gang-controlled neighborhoods. And to the north is Temple Isle, which is controlled by the worst gang of them all, the Church of Eternal Fire. There's a lot of space to get lost within, but the various
Dang, these birds are going crazy.
water features around Novigrad tend to make it easy to get your bearings. Finding the lower river gives you a straight shot to the docks and out of the city. It is also right by Hierarch Square, which is where many shops and quests are based out of. Following the coast gives an easy path through the docks and also to St. Gregory's Bridge, which can take you to Temple Isle, and even when further away from the bay, the sails of the ships docked in the harbor can be spotted from many different places across the city, giving players an easy way to orient themselves when feeling a bit lost. As for how it uses the terrain, there are exceptions to this, but generally when going north, the elevation increases, and when going south, it decreases.
Okay.
I imagine this choice stems from how we tend to associate north with up and south with down, so having that reflected in the topography feels pretty natural. Or maybe I've just spent too much time thinking about this. They also tie different social classes to the various elevations, with the upper class being at the top of the hill and the lower class being at the bottom. This
Wasn't it like in history that like a city was built around like a castle? The castle was where like the king and the queen resided, and then there was like it went in circles. Like the next circle would be like the nobleman or the upper district, and then the next layer would be like, I don't know, like the poor people or the middle class people, and then the next ring would be like the poor people, and they're like the furthest away. It would be like just farmers and shit because they needed all that extra land outside to like farm stuff and cattle and whatnot. It wasn't so much like a north-south thing. It was just like a close to the castle, away from the castle type of thing.
has a fair bit of historical basis, as nobles and royalty were often settled at the top of hills as they offered more protection from potential attacks, but here it mostly serves to further create a distinction between the various spots in the city. Quest design even plays a role in making the city more manageable to navigate by having the starting locations for main quests and major side quests all be pretty easy to keep track of. You can pretty much draw a straight line from the Rosemary and Thyme to Hierarch Square to Sigismund's Bathhouse to the Passiflora, and these are all places that are extremely significant to the story being told. While there are tons of streets that weave through the city, many end up funneling players down this line through the center of Novigrad. So if you can just have an understanding of that line, you'll typically be able to figure out where to go without needing to overly rely on your minimap. Of course, some players still will just focus on their minimap, but those who don't or even have it turned off completely won't really be that disadvantaged for it. Now, the inclusion of these aspects don't mean that players will never get lost or struggle to find a location, but the general layout and the natural natural guides the city provides likely will lessen how often it happens. These aspects aren't necessarily things you will actively think of when traversing the city, but they can be felt, and this sort of subtle approach can have a huge impact on how comfortable a player feels within a space. Novigrad's clever design leads to a city that not only feels lived in, but feels lived in by you. And
I really gotta play this game, dude. He's just like gassing this shit up.
by the end of your quest to find Ciri within it, it goes from a city you thought you'd never understand to one you largely do. I think it's worth mentioning that despite being an entirely fictional city, Novigrad does take cues from real medieval ones, and its similarity to them kind of provides a level of legitimacy. And some titles take this even a step further by being set in real-world locations. Assassin's Creed 2, for instance, Ubisoft constructed mildly faithful recreations of famous cities like Florence and Venice. The layout of the land is mostly the same, and they contain many real-world buildings that the game regularly points out to the player and provides information on. And this gives a sort of validity to the city as a whole, almost like if these buildings are right, then the others must be as well. And of course, that's not really the case. The buildings that fill...
I mean, I thought what they did in a lot of the older Assassin's Creed games, they wanted to get like the main important buildings correct for like historical accuracy, just so they can flex on everybody and be like, yeah, our buildings are like pretty freaking accurate, and now you can climb on them. But understandably, you need some like whatever buildings in between all of them. I mean, you could still like put them like in like historically accurate relative locations to like one another, but like whenever I was playing Assassin's Creed whatever, like I didn't care about the little whatever in between buildings. I just cared that you could climb on them, like up, like this is a ladder, like these stones sticking out, yep, you could climb that. And it like that's what I got from it when I played it. Like I didn't care that this was like a historically accurate like home living building space for some middle class or upper class people. I was just busy looking at like, this is probably like a historically accurate building. I have no idea what this is. It's like, all I give a shit, can I climb on it? And how do I climb on it? Is there a quest inside or something like that? Is there a target inside? Like this building is probably a whatever made up building.
In the rest of the city are plausible but not accurate. Doing a perfect one-to-one recreation of what a city looked like over 500 years ago would be impossible, and more importantly, it wouldn't support the main goal of the game, which is to make Ezio's climbing and free-running feel as fun and interesting as they can. Everything is scaled so the player always has an opportunity to make a daring escape or an undetected approach. Buildings tend to be perfect jumping distances from each other, windows and other ornamentations are spaced at just the right distance to almost never halt Ezio in his tracks, and of course, hay bales are never far from the highest lookouts in the city. It shows off just enough from reality to make the city believable, but then every aspect of how it operates, from the people walking around who you can blend in with, to scaffolding that helps you get from the street level to the rooftops, is in service of the gameplay. Another more modern example of this can be seen in Grand Theft Auto 5 with Los Santos. Now, while it is inspired by Los Angeles, Los Santos is clearly a fictional place. It has plenty of notable LA landmarks that even people who have never been there would recognize, but it isn't worried about presenting them faithfully, giving Rockstar more freedom with how they structure every bit of the city. In fact, they also do a lot to change up the terrain, and it actually uses the same elevation trick as Novigrad, where, at least in the city proper, going uphill tends to take you north and to richer areas, where going downhill brings you south into lower income parts of the city.
I actually never thought about that whenever I was playing a game that had like a big city. Up the hills equal north, down the hills equal south. I will probably keep that in mind the next time I play like a big game like this.
The city, a technique Rockstar seems to be somewhat fond of, as it can also be seen with Saint Denis in Red Dead Redemption 2. Regardless, the inclusion of aspects that many people see every day, whether it be in person or in film or television, provides a familiarity to the city that makes it more believable, but then everything else is meant to improve the gameplay. What I find most interesting about Los Santos, though, and this can really be said for every city in the Grand Theft Auto series, is that certain aspects that are brought in from real life serve their opposite function within the game. For example, example, traffic cones and delineators and stop signs aren't placed around the world to give you something to look out for and avoid. They are there for you to run into. Honestly, this is even why pedestrians are around. Grand Theft Auto is a series about ignoring inhibition, of leaning into chaos and giving in to the intrusive thoughts that cross your mind. The things that are there in real life to get us to pay attention.
But you know what? I will say this. I was gonna say in GTA, there's not really any asshole drivers like there are in real life, but that's probably because you are the most asshole of drivers when you're the main character. You're the one cutting everybody off, speeding, hitting cones, hitting people. Oh my god, I just came to that realization right now. I was like, well, there's no real asshole drivers. Like, they don't cut you off and not use their blinker and whatnot. I think that was that a conscious decision? Like, the cars that are going the speed limit, are the cars like programmed to like use the blinker or to not use the blinker? I've never really looked at that detail. Yeah, like, is this driver supposed to be like an asshole because he doesn't use his blinker but then merges? Or I've never really seen like any other cars that are just speeding at the same speed that the main character is speeding through, or like speeding as. Probably because anytime I get in a car at GTA, I'm always just like full, like, push the gas as hard as I can. Just get from point A to point B. Yeah.
And slow down and be safe are meant not just to be ignored in Grand Theft Auto, but to be transgressed. It is a city that looks the same as ones in the real world, but the way players are supposed to engage with it is fundamentally in opposition with how they would in real life. Honestly, I think this is part of why with GTA and other games that take a similar approach to it, people get annoyed that they can't enter every building they come across. While this obviously isn't something most of us would do in the real world, theoretically, you have the ability to break into almost anywhere. So the fact that in a game that is all about theft and destruction of property, most buildings don't have insides you can break into, the absence is noticed. Of course, having interiors for every single building would be a ridiculous use of resources, and the benefits of it would not outweigh the toll it would have on the studio and the game as a whole. But pragmatism aside, not being able to rob any house does still have a slight negative impact on the experience the game is trying to cultivate. All things considered though, these hiccups that get in the way of crime sprees are pretty few and far between. The city—
maybe that will change with GTA 6. Maybe they'll come up with some sort of new technology to make it so that whenever you're not near a building, or they can sense whenever you're about to walk up to a building, it's like, oh, quick, load this building. Okay. And then, okay, this dude's just rolling by the building. Don't load it. I don't know. Maybe that could be really cool if you could actually go into like every single building in a GTA game. That's a really cool thing.
And how it operates is designed to help allow the player to cause as much chaos as they want without many obstacles. Like, roads are bigger relative to cars than they are in the real world, making it easy to swerve between them. Also, despite Los Santos being based on LA, you will never find yourself in a traffic jam. Curbs are low and easy to drive over, exits on the highway are frequent, and places to hide out from the cops during a chase where no one will rat you out are abundant. Like, even Los Santos's demographics play into this. There isn't a single kid in the city. If Rockstar had included them, in order for the game to get a rating, they would have had to go with the Skyrim or Red Dead Redemption 2 route of making them invincible, which—
oh, what? I never even thought of that. That's crazy. You can't kill kids in any of these games? Oh my god. I never thought of that. And if there's any, like, because there are some quests in Skyrim where, like, the kid, like, what was it, like in Dark Brotherhood, when you first like get introduced to them, and like, depending on if you're in the right city or not, it's like the kid is like possessed or something, and then the kid like kills like some person or whatever, and it's like, okay, oh my god. But would that really make a game better if they were kids in there and you could kill them? I don't know. Like, would it? I mean, it would add like way more gravity to a game or like a quest or something like that. I don't know, maybe.
which would have
I mean, because if you think about it, it's like back in like I think if you take a game like Skyrim, which is like supposed to be like in the middle or the medieval times, it's like the life expectancy of like an average person was like what, 30, 40. That was it. So it's like way more kids just died at like younger ages. So it's like okay, it was kind of like realistic in that sense. But then if you take a game like GTA, where it's like that's not really the issue, people have life expectancies of like 70 or 80 or 90. It's like okay, you would expect the kids to be invincible in this one. Ah,
Skyrim or Red Dead Redemption 2 route of making them invincible, which would have impeded on the player's ability to be as destructive as they want. So to not get in the way of that, they're just not there at all.
I really did not notice that. Holy crap.
The Grand Theft Auto series is meant to feel like a chaotic playground, and while on the surface it resembles
Because you know, if any of those games were to have like packs of kids just rolling around like just randomly skateboarding or biking or roller skating, you know some YouTuber would be like going around the city killing kids. You know somebody would make that video just to like get viral with it and whatnot. Like that like what was it in Red Dead Redemption? There was that one dude. It was like was it in Red Dead Redemption or like some other game where he's like going around lassoing all the feminists and feeding them to like a crocodile or something?
a real city, the shifts it makes to real things are just enough to allow you to engage with it in a way most people would never and should never in their own life. In contrast to this, in Rockstar's follow-up to GTA 5, Red Dead Redemption 2, the design goal seems much more about including things that will enhance the story of Arthur Morgan instead of the gameplay capabilities of the player. It is still a bit of a chaos playground, but by and large, the game wants players to explore Arthur's life and not just use him as an avatar for destruction. While there are choices that do influence who Arthur becomes, there is a distinct story the game is aiming to tell, and almost every aspect of the world plays a role in telling that story. And this is reflected beautifully with the city of Saint Denis. Reaching Saint Denis is a pivotal part of the story for Arthur. Throughout the whole game, the Pinkertons are closing in on the Vanderlyn gang, pushing them into a corner, and Saint Denis is that corner. It represents the way of life they have been rejecting this whole time. Where Novigrad feels similar to the rest of the world of The Witcher 3, just massively compressed, Saint Denis feels like a whole new world altogether. The roads are all paved in stone, trolleys attached to power lines weave through the streets, and smoke from the factories clog the skies. Civilization is creeping into the frontier that Arthur and company has rode and ruled over, and time is starting to run out. It is designed to make you feel equal parts awe and dread as this new way of life starts to take over, and it also aligns thematically with the struggles Arthur is going through during this section of the game. Like, what or who can he trust in this ever-changing world? Who is he if everything he once lived by gets left behind? What does it mean to live a good life? Technically, players can reach Saint Denis whenever they want, but
I still haven't even played Red Dead Redemption 2 yet. I need to play this.
coming by it through the natural progression of the narrative creates a very powerful moment of story aligning with setting. Of course, while I do love when games use the juxtaposition of going from an open expanse to a dense metropolis to hammer home a theme, as it also serves to make the world as a whole feel more cohesive and like it exists beyond the game, there is also something to be said about titles that use their setting to make players feel eternally isolated. Take Cyberpunk 2077. It largely takes place all within Night City, and it sort of does the opposite of Grand Theft Auto 5 in terms of not getting in the player's way. Where Los Santos is simple and quick to navigate, Night City is an utter mess of roads and buildings that barely make sense. There's a really great video by Morphologist where he examines the design of Night City, and one of the major things he talks about there is
An architect reviews Cyberpunk 2077's Night City. Oh. I think I need to play Cyberpunk and then watch this shit.
how it really feels like a product of the setting it takes place within. Cyberpunk as a genre is one where corporations and capitalism are king, and red tape and regulations are for losers. When some industry needs a building or a road or anything really that will help their bottom line, it gets built regardless of its long-term efficacy. Night City is an amalgamation of countless ventures that are barely compatible, making the city itself a nightmare to move through efficiently. And as I brought up with Novigrad, while this creates the design—
Holy shit. Bro, this is crazy to, like, even this little chunk of the city. I didn't know the map was this, like, complicated.
desired effect of having players feel lost within and locked into the city, it does risk alienating them whenever they have to move through it. But what's different here is that navigation feeling so sloppy plays into a major theme of the setting, that of overwhelming urban expanse that hardly cares about the people living there. In the scheme of the greater system, you barely are even recognized as a pawn, and the city is almost suffocating because of it. Unlike Novigrad, Night City is not meant to ever be understood, and while you may be able to orient around some major structures and figure out the layout of a few more regularly traveled areas, it is hard to ever break free of the navigational tools the game offers, like the minimap. And for those who watch me a lot, you might assume I think this is a bad thing, but I actually think it works better here than in most titles, as another major aspect of the genre, and this game in particular, is a reliance on tech. It's the main way your character gets upgraded and is a part of who they are, so needing to rely on a minimap to get pretty much anywhere fits in perfectly with this concept. Despite exploration being an element of Cyberpunk 2077's design, it's not what the game really centers around, at least not when compared to something like The Witcher 3. The point of Novigrad's scope is to make searching for Ciri feel like looking for a needle in a haystack, but the point of Night City's scope is to make living within it feel inescapable and heavy, which I imagine is why CD Projekt Red leaned more into creating an incredibly dense and obtruse place instead of one with obvious signposting. The world beyond Night City almost feels impossible, and that's what makes the idea of it so enticing.
That is really cool. I did not know that. I really got to get around to playing Cyberpunk.
I think the reason cities in video games pique my interest in a different way than other settings do is because of how layered they need to be to feel realistic. There are so many moving pieces all concentrated in a relatively small space, and that is a harder thing to fake than a village or a cave or a forest. Realism in games is a pretty common talking point, and as graphical capabilities become more robust and mechanical systems more complex, we will keep getting closer and closer to being able to make games that truly simulate more of reality. While I'm sure that there could be an incredible title where you're an inhabitant of a simulated city, one where actions of NPCs change the state of the world, where the locations of things matter in order to keep the city running, where any action you make can interrupt the process of the place you're in, I don't think this kind of dedication to realism will make games better. It sounds good, and in the right context could be good, but for the most part, I don't think it actually would serve most titles.
I think I would agree. There is not really any tangible benefit to making a realistic city. Like you said, there could be a case where the realistic city is actually beneficial, but for the most part, just make the city like benefit the player the most.
Games are tailored experiences aimed to get players to feel specific ways, and this means creating a reality that is made to make them feel a specific way. And I think that's what players want. They want a city that feels alive and is intuitive to move through. They want one that enhances the core gameplay. They want one that allows them to experiment in ways they never could in real life. They want one that enhances the story being told. Video game cities are weird because if they weren't, they wouldn't support the vision of their respective games. Ultimately, as much as we may say we might, I don't think we really want realism. At least not to its fullest extent. It's limiting, and in the context of video games, often pointless. What I think
it's just got to be real enough. That's what I think. Like the cities just have to be real enough, just good enough.
we actually want, whether it be in relation to cities or any other part of a game, is the illusion of realism. But as recognizing that something is an illusion often breaks the illusion, I guess let's just keep saying we want realism. And
yeah.
maybe we'll believe it.
No, I don't. Actually, just watching this video makes me realize I don't want a realistic city. I don't want to walk around all of the and see all the whatever buildings. Just give me like a couple iconic buildings, maybe like a bridge or two here or there, some little key scenes in the city, and then just tell the story. Huh. I never really thought about this.
And while we're doing some pretending, let's pretend like this transition is good. I have a pair of headphones that I really love. My ears have fully adjusted to them, so everything else kind of sounds like trash now. They are what I plan to use for the foreseeable ever, but the downside to them is that they are just headphones. But this video's sponsor, Antlion Audio, has the perfect solution for this problem in the Mod Mic. There are a bunch of different versions of it that might be great for you depending on your needs, but I've been trying out the Mod Mic USB 2 and it's awesome. It sounds great. It's what I'm using to record this right now, and it can be attached to any flat surface, even a paper bag. This doesn't hurt, I promise. Using it is as simple as
That's actually a pretty good sounding like little mic for a little thing like that.
plugging it in, and it comes with a USB 3 adapter, making it possible to attach it to all sorts of other devices like your phone or Steam Deck. It's practical and versatile, making it the perfect option for doing everything from chatting with friends to streaming. Also, if all your USB ports are full, they did recently come out with the Mod Mic Uni 2, which has a universal 3.5mm input and also sounds great. The point is, whatever your needs are, there's a good chance Antlion has something for you. Everything they offer, from the Mod Mic line to the in-ear Camura line, gives a significant amount of bang for your buck. And if you're watching this around
Anytime Raz does these type of videos, I always have to imagine he literally just has his hand in a bag and he's like bending down and just shaking his hand. Oh my god.
around the time the video went live, they are running a Cyber Week sale from November 26th to December 2nd, where you can get 15% off all Mod Mic and Camura products, making your buck bang even harder. So if you're looking for an adaptable headset microphone without breaking the bank, check them out. Just go to the link in the description and find what works best for you. Anyway, thanks to Antlion Audio for sponsoring this video. For everyone still here, I hope you're well. Big thanks to my patrons who make this channel possible. It really means a lot. With that, I hope you have a great day and or night, and I'll see you in the next one.
Huh. That was actually pretty cool. I never really thought about like how realistic a city was versus how unrealistic it was. Dang. I think I actually got to go back and play some of those games, because a lot of the ones he used examples are like I'm starting to get like so old and I haven't even played these games yet. I need to. But man, cities are weird, dude. This is a good video. I like this. This was pretty cool. This was awesome. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I'll catch you guys on the next one. All right, later.